There are moments in life when everything you thought you needed is taken away. The relationship ends, the opportunity disappears. The people you trusted walk away. The plan you built for your future suddenly falls apart. And when the dust settles, you look around and wonder, what do I have left? But sometimes, losing everything is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the moment your real story begins. Because when everything around you becomes uncertain, you are forced to discover what is certain within you. When people stop applauding, you discover whether you can still believe in yourself. When the door closes, you discover whether you have the courage to build another door. When the familiar disappears, you discover strength you never knew you possessed. You thought you were losing your life, but perhaps you were losing what was keeping you from becoming who you were meant to be. There are seasons when life strips away your comfort, your certainty, and your dependence on other people. Not because you are worthless, but because you have been carrying things that were never meant to define you. Sometimes you have to lose the crowd to hear your own voice. Sometimes you have to lose the relationship to rediscover your identity. Sometimes you have to lose the position to discover your purpose. And I want you to understand this: what left your life did not necessarily take your future with it. You are still here. You are still breathing. You are still capable of learning, rebuilding, growing, and becoming. The chapter that broke you does not have the authority to write the final chapter of your life. The first thing you discover when everything falls apart is that you are stronger than you thought you were. You may have believed your strength came from the people around you, from your achievements, from your money, from your position, or from the approval you received. But when those things disappear, something deeper begins to emerge. You begin to realize, I survived what I thought would destroy me. That realization changes you. You stop begging people to stay because you finally understand that your worth does not depend on someone's decision to remain. You stop chasing every opportunity because you realize that one closed door cannot cancel your potential. You stop defining yourself by your mistakes because you understand that failure can be an experience without becoming an identity. Pain may introduce you to a version of yourself that comfort never allowed you to meet. And that version of you may be quieter, wiser, stronger, and more intentional. You begin to understand that losing something does not always mean losing yourself. Sometimes losing something is exactly what helps you find yourself. The second thing you discover is the difference between what you wanted and what you truly needed. There are things we fight desperately to keep because we believe they are essential to our happiness. Then life removes them, and slowly we realize that we were holding on to something simply because we were afraid of what would happen without it. Not everything you lose was meant to follow you into your next season. Some things were only meant to teach you. Some people were only meant to introduce you to a lesson. Some opportunities were only meant to prepare you for another opportunity. Some disappointments were only meant to redirect your attention towards something greater. Do not spend the rest of your life standing at the grave of something that was never supposed to live forever. There is a future waiting for you, but you cannot walk into it while constantly turning around to mourn what has already ended. The third thing you discover is your own voice. When you have spent years listening to everyone else, you can become disconnected from what you actually believe. You start making decisions based on approval instead of conviction. You become afraid to disappoint people, so you disappoint yourself. You become so concerned with being accepted that you forget to ask whether the life you are building is truly yours. But when everything becomes quiet, you finally hear yourself. You begin asking better questions. What do I really want? What matters to me? What kind of person do I want to become? What lessons did this season teach me? What am I willing to leave behind? What am I willing to build from here? And those questions can change the direction of your life. You don't need everyone to understand your next move. You need enough clarity to take the next right step. The fourth thing you discover is that rebuilding requires patience. When you lose something important, you may want everything restored immediately. You want the pain to disappear immediately. You want the next opportunity immediately. You want your confidence back immediately. But rebuilding rarely happens overnight. A broken routine must be rebuilt one day at a time. Confidence must be rebuilt through small promises kept to yourself. Trust must be rebuilt through consistent actions. A new future must be built through decisions that may seem insignificant today but become powerful over time. Do not despise small beginnings. If all you can do today is take one healthy step forward, take it. If all you can do is learn one lesson, learn it. If all you can do is begin again, begin. You do not have to have your entire future figured out before you take your next step. Sometimes clarity comes while you are moving. The fifth thing you discover is that your identity is bigger than your circumstances. You are not the job you lost. You are not the rejection you experienced. You are not the mistake you made. You are not the relationship that ended. You are not the season that embarrassed you. Those things are chapters. They are not the entire book. You can acknowledge what happened without allowing it to become who you are. There will come a moment when you look back and realize that the season you once considered your greatest loss became the season that taught you your greatest strength. You will realize that the silence gave you wisdom. The disappointment gave you discernment. The ending gave you courage. The loneliness gave you independence. The setback gave you resilience. And the loss gave you an opportunity to meet yourself without all the distractions. So if you are standing in a season where you feel like everything has been taken away, don't assume that your life is over. Maybe you are being given the opportunity to rebuild it differently. Maybe this is your moment to stop living according to other people's expectations and start living according to your values. Maybe this is the season where you stop asking, "Why did I lose this?" and start asking, "What can I become because I went through this?" Because sometimes the greatest discovery is not what you find after you lose something. It is who you discover yourself to be while rebuilding. You may have lost the situation, but you did not lose your ability to grow. You may have lost the opportunity, but you did not lose your potential. You may have lost the relationship, but you did not lose your capacity to love, learn, and become wiser. You may have lost your direction, but you can still take another step. And perhaps the most powerful thing you can say after everything falls apart is not, "I have nothing left." It is, "I still have me." And sometimes discovering that is the beginning of everything. There are some lessons life cannot teach you while everything is comfortable. You can read about strength. You can listen to people talk about courage. You can watch others overcome difficult seasons and think you understand resilience. But there is a difference between hearing about strength and discovering it inside yourself. Sometimes life places you in a season where the things you depended on are no longer there. The people you expected to stay may leave. The opportunity you thought was guaranteed may disappear. The plan you carefully created may suddenly change, and for a moment, you may feel as though the foundation beneath you has disappeared. But then something unexpected happens. You keep going. You wake up the next morning. You take another step. You face another day. And slowly you begin to realize something. The situation changed, but you are still here. You thought you needed everything around you to remain the same in order to survive, but you discovered that there was strength inside you that you had never been forced to use before. There is a version of you that comfort never introduced you to. Comfort can make you believe that your strength comes from circumstances. When everything is working, you may think you are strong because you have people supporting you, opportunities surrounding you, and everything moving according to plan. But when the support disappears, you discover whether your foundation was external or internal. This is why some of the hardest seasons can become some of the most revealing seasons of your life. When you have nothing to prove to anyone, you begin to understand who you really are. When nobody is clapping, you learn to keep moving. When nobody is encouraging you, you learn how to encourage yourself. When nobody is opening the door, you learn how to keep searching for another path. When the familiar disappears, you discover your ability to adapt. And when you finally look back, you realize that you survived days you once believed you could never survive. That realization is powerful, because there is something about surviving a difficult season that changes the way you see yourself. Before the struggle, you might say, "I think I can handle this." After the struggle, you can say, "I know I can handle difficult things because I have already done it." That is the difference between confidence that comes from theory and confidence that comes from experience. You don't have to pretend that the pain was easy. You don't have to pretend that losing something didn't hurt. You don't have to call every difficult experience a blessing while you are still processing it. But you can recognize what the experience revealed about you. It revealed that you can keep moving when life becomes uncertain. It revealed that you can learn from disappointment. It revealed that you can rebuild after a setback. It revealed that you can stand without constantly needing someone else to hold you up. And perhaps most importantly, it revealed that your circumstances do not have complete control over your identity. You may have been knocked down, but being knocked down is not the same as being defeated. There will be moments when you feel tired. There will be moments when you question yourself. There will be moments when you wonder whether starting again is worth the effort, but strength does not always look like confidence. Sometimes strength looks like continuing while you are still uncertain. Sometimes strength looks like getting out of bed and choosing to try again. Sometimes strength looks like admitting that something hurt you and still refusing to let that pain control your future. Sometimes strength looks like saying, I don't understand what is happening, but I am not going to give up on myself. That is strength. And you may not recognize it while you are experiencing it because real growth is often happening quietly. Nobody may see the internal battle you are fighting. Nobody may see the discipline it takes to keep going. Nobody may know how many times you had to remind yourself that your future is still worth pursuing. But you know, and one day, the person you become will understand what the person you were going through could not yet see. You will understand why you had to become more independent. You will understand why you had to learn patience. You will understand why you had to stop depending on constant approval. You will understand why certain disappointments forced you to mature. You will understand that some seasons were not designed to make you comfortable. They were designed to make you stronger. There is a strength that only develops when you have to stand on your own feet. There is a wisdom that only comes after disappointment. There is a confidence that only develops after you discover that failure did not destroy you. And once you discover that, you stop being so afraid of every setback. You begin to understand that if something changes, you can adjust. If one door closes, you can look for another. If a plan fails, you can create a new plan. If you make a mistake, you can learn from it. If you lose something important, you can grieve it, learn from it, and continue building. That doesn't mean you become careless about loss. It means you stop allowing the fear of loss to control every decision you make. You realize that you are capable of beginning again. And beginning again is one of the greatest forms of courage. Think about how many times you thought you were finished, but somehow you continued. Think about the moments when you didn't know what to do next, yet eventually you found your way. Think about the days when you felt uncertain, but you kept learning. Think about the disappointment that once felt like the end of your story, but today you can look back and see that it became part of your growth. You are evidence that difficult seasons can be survived. You are evidence that a setback can become a lesson. You are evidence that losing something does not automatically mean losing everything. Because sometimes when life removes what you thought you needed, it reveals what you already had. You had courage, you had resilience, you had the ability to learn, you had the ability to adapt, you had the ability to rise after disappointment. You had a voice that needed to be heard. You had a future that was bigger than one painful chapter. And perhaps you never knew any of that until life forced you to discover it. So don't only measure your life by what you lost. Measure it by what you learned. Measure it by how you grew. Measure it by how you changed. Measure it by how you kept moving when you had every reason to stop. Because there are things about yourself you will never discover while everything is easy. Sometimes you discover your courage when the comfort disappears. Sometimes you discover your discipline when motivation disappears. Sometimes you discover your independence when support disappears. Sometimes you discover your identity when the labels disappear. And sometimes, when you lose what you thought defined you, you finally meet the person underneath all those definitions. That person may be stronger than you imagined. That person may be wiser than you realized. That person may still be growing, still learning, still becoming. But that person is capable of continuing. And that discovery can change everything about the way you face the next season of your life. There are moments in life when we become so attached to certain people, opportunities, plans, and circumstances that we begin to believe our happiness depends on them remaining exactly where they are. We convince ourselves that if this relationship works, we will be okay. If this opportunity comes through, everything will finally make sense. If this person stays, we will feel secure. If this plan succeeds, then we will know that our life is moving in the right direction. But life has a way of challenging those assumptions. Sometimes the thing you desperately wanted is not the thing that would have helped you grow. Sometimes the door you begged to remain open needed to close. Sometimes the person you were afraid to lose was not meant to walk with you into your next season. Sometimes the opportunity you considered perfect would have kept you comfortable when you needed to become courageous. And sometimes the ending you called a tragedy becomes the beginning of a deeper understanding of yourself. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept because when something leaves your life, your first reaction may be to ask, why did this happen to me? But eventually, a better question begins to emerge. What is this experience teaching me? That question changes your perspective. Instead of only looking at what disappeared, you begin looking at what the experience revealed. Maybe you discovered that you had been settling. Maybe you discovered that you were depending too heavily on someone else's approval. Maybe you discovered that you had ignored your own needs because you were afraid of losing someone. Maybe you discovered that you were pursuing a goal because other people expected it from you, not because it truly mattered to you. Maybe you discovered that what you thought was security was actually keeping you from growing. Loss has a way of removing distractions. When everything is available to you, it can be difficult to determine what actually matters. But when something important is removed, your priorities become clearer. You begin asking yourself different questions. What is really important to me? What kind of person do I want to become? What am I willing to carry into my future? What am I finally willing to release? What lessons do I refuse to repeat? What relationships bring out the best in me? What choices are aligned with the person I am becoming? These questions may be uncomfortable, but they can lead you toward a more honest life. Because sometimes you don't need more things, you need more clarity. Sometimes you don't need more people around you. You need to understand yourself. Sometimes you don't need another opportunity immediately. You need time to prepare for the opportunity that will eventually come. Sometimes you don't need an explanation for why something ended. You need the courage to accept that it ended and decide what you will do next. There is a difference between wanting something and needing something. You may want someone's approval, but you need self-respect. You may want everyone to understand you, but you need confidence in your own values. You may want everything to happen according to your timeline, but you need patience. You may want to return to the way things were, but you may need to grow into something new. You may want to hold on to the past because it is familiar, while your future requires you to become unfamiliar with an old version of yourself. This is why letting go can be so powerful. Letting go does not mean that you never cared. It does not mean that the experience was meaningless. It does not mean that you have to pretend the loss didn't matter. It simply means that you are choosing not to allow something that ended to control everything that comes next. There is a time to mourn what you lost, and there is a time to begin building what remains. You cannot rebuild while constantly trying to recreate the past. You cannot move towards something new while spending all your energy trying to make the old thing return. At some point, you have to look at what is in front of you. You have to take inventory of your life. What do I still have? What have I learned? What strengths have I developed? What mistakes can I avoid repeating? What opportunities are still available? What kind of future can I build from here? Those questions help you move from helplessness toward responsibility. And responsibility is powerful because it reminds you that although you may not control everything that happens to you, you can still influence what you do with what happens. You may not have chosen the ending, but you can choose what you learn from it. You may not have chosen the disappointment, but you can choose whether it becomes a lesson or a permanent limitation. You may not have chosen the closed door, but you can choose whether you remain standing in front of it or start looking for another path. That is where growth begins. There are people who spend years trying to recover exactly what they lost, only to discover that they were supposed to create something different. They keep asking, how do I get my old life back? But perhaps the better question is, what can I build with the person I have become? Because you are not the same person you were before the loss. The experience changed your perspective. It may have made you more thoughtful. It may have taught you boundaries. It may have taught you patience. It may have shown you the importance of choosing relationships wisely. It may have taught you not to place your entire identity in one person, one position, or one outcome. That doesn't mean the loss was easy. It means you can choose to make meaning from it. And sometimes the greatest freedom comes when you stop demanding that the past give you back what it took. You stop waiting for an apology before allowing yourself to grow. You stop waiting for someone to return before moving forward. You stop waiting for the perfect opportunity before developing yourself. You stop waiting for everything to make sense before taking another step. You begin working with what you have. And when you start doing that, you discover that you have more than you thought. You have experience. You have lessons. You have abilities. You have time to learn. You have choices. You have the opportunity to make better decisions. You have the ability to become more intentional about who you allow into your life and what you allow to define you. Sometimes the greatest thing you can gain from losing something is perspective. You begin to understand that not every ending deserves to be reversed. Some endings deserve to be understood. Some doors deserve to remain closed. Some chapters deserve to stay in the past. Some relationships teach you what you will and will not accept in the future. Some failures teach you how to approach the next opportunity with greater wisdom. Some disappointments teach you that your identity must be bigger than your circumstances. And some losses teach you that you can survive without what you once believed you could never live without. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it can also be liberating. Because once you understand that you can survive the absence of certain things, you become less desperate to hold on to everything. You begin choosing instead of clinging. You begin evaluating instead of simply accepting. You begin asking whether something belongs in your future rather than whether you can somehow force it to remain in your present. And that is a powerful transformation. You stop saying, "I need this because I am afraid to lose it." You begin saying, "If this belongs in my life, I will value it. If it leaves, I will learn from it. And if a new chapter begins, I will have the courage to step into it." That mindset gives you room to grow. It gives you permission to stop chasing what has already ended. It gives you permission to stop measuring your future by the standards of your past. And it teaches you that sometimes the loss was not taking you backward. It was creating space for you to discover what truly matters. There are seasons in life when you become so accustomed to listening to everyone else that you slowly lose touch with yourself. You listen to what people think you should do. You listen to what society expects from you. You listen to the opinions of friends, family, coworkers, and people who may never fully understand your journey. And without realizing it, you can become so focused on meeting everyone's expectations that you forget to ask yourself what you truly believe. You start making decisions based on approval. You choose a path because it looks impressive. You stay somewhere because you are afraid of disappointing someone. You remain silent because you don't want conflict. You say yes when you really mean no. You follow the crowd because standing alone feels uncomfortable. And eventually, you may look at your own life and wonder, when did I stop listening to myself? Sometimes losing everything creates a silence where you can finally hear your own voice again. When the noise disappears, you begin to think differently. You begin to question the choices you made. You begin to examine the beliefs you accepted without questioning. You begin to recognize the difference between what you genuinely want and what you were simply taught to want. That can be uncomfortable because discovering yourself often means admitting that some of the things you were chasing were never truly yours. Maybe you were trying to impress people. Maybe you were trying to prove that you were successful. Maybe you were trying to become the person everyone expected you to be. Maybe you were afraid that if you changed direction, people would criticize you. But eventually, you have to decide whether you want to spend your life being accepted by everyone else or becoming honest with yourself. You cannot build a meaningful life while constantly ignoring your own convictions. And this does not mean you stop listening to wise advice. It means you learn to distinguish between advice and pressure. It means you can listen to someone without surrendering your ability to think. It means you can respect someone else's opinion without allowing their opinion to become the ruler of your life. Because there is a difference between guidance and control. There is a difference between wisdom and criticism. There is a difference between someone helping you grow and someone trying to make you fit their expectations. When you begin finding your voice, you begin developing the courage to make decisions based on what you believe is right rather than what will receive the most applause. That kind of courage does not always feel powerful at first. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it means saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. Sometimes it means choosing a slower path because you know it is right for you. Sometimes it means walking away from an environment that no longer aligns with your values. Sometimes it means admitting that you made a mistake and changing direction. Sometimes it means starting over while people around you are wondering why. But you cannot allow other people's confusion to become the reason you abandon your own growth. Not everyone will understand your journey, and they don't have to. Some people only understand the version of you they were comfortable with. When you change, they may question you. When you grow, they may tell you that you've changed. When you become more confident, they may interpret it incorrectly. When you establish boundaries, they may call you difficult. When you stop chasing approval, they may wonder why you no longer behave the way you used to. But growth often changes your relationship with approval. You begin to understand that being misunderstood is not always a sign that you are wrong. Sometimes it simply means someone else does not have the same perspective you have. You have to learn how to remain respectful without abandoning yourself. That is part of maturity. Finding your voice also means learning to speak to yourself differently. Think about how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake. Do you immediately tell yourself that you are incapable? Do you define yourself by one failure? Do you replay your mistakes over and over? Or do you remind yourself that mistakes are part of learning? Your internal voice matters. If the only voice you hear is criticism, you will struggle to recognize your own potential. You need a voice inside you that says, I can learn from this. A voice that says, this setback does not define me. A voice that says, I don't have to have everything figured out today. A voice that says, I can take another step. That voice becomes especially important when external voices become negative. Because there will be moments when people doubt you. There will be moments when circumstances make you question yourself. There will be moments when the results are slower than you expected. And during those moments, you need to have developed an internal foundation strong enough to keep you moving. This is why solitude can sometimes become valuable. Not isolation from everyone, but intentional quiet, time to think, time to reflect, time to understand what you believe, time to examine your goals, time to ask whether the life you are building actually reflects your values. When you spend time in quiet reflection, you begin noticing things that constant noise hides. You begin recognizing what drains you. You begin recognizing what inspires you. You begin understanding which relationships deserve your energy. You begin seeing which habits are helping you and which ones are holding you back. You begin identifying the things you have been doing simply because you are afraid to do something different. And that awareness gives you choices. You cannot change what you refuse to recognize. But once you become aware of something, you can begin making a different decision. Maybe you realize you have been seeking validation. Maybe you realize you have been comparing yourself with others. Maybe you realize you have been afraid of failure. Maybe you realize you have been waiting for someone else to give you permission to pursue something meaningful. And then you realize something important. You don't have to wait forever for permission to become a better version of yourself. You can begin learning. You can begin preparing. You can begin improving. You can begin making wiser choices. You can begin taking responsibility for your direction. Finding your voice does not mean becoming loud. Some of the strongest people are not the loudest people in the room. They are simply clear about who they are. They do not need to announce every decision. They do not need to explain every boundary. They do not need to convince everyone that their choices are valid. They have developed an inner certainty that allows them to move forward without constantly seeking approval. That is a different kind of strength. It is quiet, but it is powerful. It allows you to say, I respect your opinion, but I have to make the decision that I believe is right. It allows you to say, I made a mistake, but I will learn from it. It allows you to say, this path no longer fits who I am becoming. It allows you to say, I don't know exactly what comes next, but I know I cannot remain where I am. And sometimes that is all the clarity you need. You don't need a complete map. You need enough courage to take the next honest step. When you find your voice, you also become more intentional about your future. You stop asking, what will make everyone happy? And you start asking, what decision reflects the person I am trying to become? You stop asking, what will people say? And you start asking, will I respect myself for making this decision? You stop asking, how can I keep everyone from being disappointed? And you start asking, what is the responsible and honest thing for me to do? Those questions shift your entire mindset. Because the goal is not to live a life where nobody is disappointed with you. That is impossible. The goal is to live a life where your choices are guided by wisdom, responsibility, and values rather than constant fear of other people's opinions. Sometimes you have to disappoint someone to stop disappointing yourself. Sometimes you have to step away from the crowd to hear your own thoughts. Sometimes you have to stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what they want to believe about you. And sometimes you have to become comfortable with the fact that your next chapter may look different from the life people expected you to live. When you lose everything, the silence can feel frightening at first. But if you listen carefully, that silence can reveal something important. It can reveal your thoughts, your values, your dreams, your boundaries, your convictions, your priorities. And underneath all the expectations, labels, and opinions, you may discover a voice that has been waiting for you to listen. A voice that reminds you that your life is still yours to shape. A voice that tells you that you can learn from the past without living inside it. A voice that reminds you that you can respect other people without surrendering your identity. A voice that says you can move forward even when you don't have everyone's approval. And when you finally begin listening to that voice, you may realize that losing the noise was what allowed you to hear yourself clearly. When everything falls apart, one of the hardest things to accept is that you cannot rebuild your entire life in one day. You may want immediate answers. You may want immediate progress. You may want to wake up tomorrow and feel completely different from the person who went to sleep tonight. But healing, growth, and rebuilding rarely happen on your preferred schedule. We live in a world that teaches us to expect quick results. We want instant solutions, immediate success, and fast transformation. But some of the most important changes in your life happen slowly, quietly, and consistently. A tree does not become strong because it grew quickly. It becomes strong because it kept growing. And sometimes your life works the same way. After a major disappointment, you may feel pressure to prove that you are okay. You may want to show everyone that the setback did not affect you. You may want to recover so quickly that nobody notices how difficult the season actually was. But you don't have to rush your growth just to convince other people that you are strong. Strength is not pretending that nothing happened. Strength is giving yourself permission to learn, adjust, and continue. There is nothing wrong with taking your time to rebuild. If your confidence was shaken, rebuild it slowly. If your plans changed, create a new plan one step at a time. If you made mistakes, learn from them instead of demanding perfection from yourself. If you lost direction, start by identifying one small thing you can do today. You don't have to solve your entire future before you go to sleep tonight. You only need to take the next responsible step. That is how rebuilding happens. One decision, one lesson, one habit, one conversation, one opportunity, one day at a time. Sometimes we make the mistake of looking at the distance between where we are and where we want to be, and the distance feels so large that we become discouraged. But instead of asking, how far do I still have to go? Ask yourself, what can I do today? That question brings your attention back to what you can control. Maybe today you can learn something. Maybe today you can organize your priorities. Maybe today you can practice a skill. Maybe today you can make a better decision than you made yesterday. Maybe today you can simply refuse to give up on yourself. Small progress is still progress. Do not underestimate what consistent small actions can accomplish over time. A person who takes one meaningful step every day can eventually travel farther than someone who waits for the perfect moment to make one giant leap. Your rebuilding season may not look impressive from the outside. People may not notice it. There may be no applause. There may be no announcement. There may be no dramatic transformation. But underneath the surface, something important is happening. You are becoming more disciplined. You are becoming more thoughtful. You are becoming more patient. You are becoming more aware of your choices. You are learning how to make decisions without panic. You are learning how to continue even when motivation disappears. That is real growth. And sometimes the quietest seasons produce the strongest foundations. Think about a foundation beneath a building. Most people don't admire the foundation because they don't see it. But the strength of everything above it depends on what was built underneath. Your rebuilding season is often like that. You may not see dramatic results yet, but you may be developing the foundation that will support the future you are trying to create. This is why you cannot compare your rebuilding process with someone else's finished product. You don't know what they went through before you saw the results. You don't know how many years they spent learning. You don't know how many mistakes they made. You don't know how many times they had to start again. You are seeing their chapter 10 while you are living through your chapter 3. Comparison will make you impatient with your own process. You will start thinking, why am I not there yet? But the question is not whether you are where someone else is. The question is whether you are moving in a healthier and wiser direction. Progress does not always mean moving faster. Sometimes progress means moving smarter. Sometimes progress means refusing to repeat an old mistake. Sometimes progress means recognizing a pattern and choosing differently. Sometimes progress means learning to pause before making a decision. Sometimes progress means choosing long-term growth over short-term comfort. You may not feel transformed, but if you are making better decisions, you are changing. You may not feel successful yet, but if you are developing valuable skills, you are progressing. You may not have reached your destination, but if you are learning how to navigate, you are becoming more capable. That is why patience matters. Patience does not mean doing nothing. Patience means continuing to work without demanding that the results appear immediately. It means planting the seed and continuing to care for it even before you can see the tree. It means studying when nobody is watching. It means practicing when nobody is applauding. It means building your character when there is no audience. It means trusting that consistent effort has value even when the outcome is not visible yet. There will be days when you feel like nothing is changing. On those days, remember that not every important change is immediately visible. Your thinking may be changing. Your habits may be changing. Your standards may be changing. Your ability to handle disappointment may be changing. Your understanding of yourself may be changing. And those internal changes can eventually affect everything you do externally. You may also discover that rebuilding requires you to stop trying to recover the exact person you were before the loss. Maybe you are not supposed to become who you were again. Maybe you are supposed to become wiser. You don't need to return to the old version of yourself. You can take the lessons from that version and create something new. The goal is not to erase the past. The goal is to learn from it without allowing it to control your future. And that takes time. Give yourself time to understand what happened. Give yourself time to recognize what you learned. Give yourself time to discover what you want next. Give yourself time to develop the skills required for your next chapter. You do not need to rush because someone else is moving faster. Your journey has its own pace. There is also a danger in rushing into the next chapter simply because you are uncomfortable with the current one. When you are hurting, you may want to replace what you lost immediately. You may want to make a major decision just to escape the feeling of uncertainty. But not every decision made from desperation is a wise decision. Sometimes you need to pause. Sometimes you need to think. Sometimes you need to gather information. Sometimes you need to let your emotions settle before deciding what comes next. Patience gives you space between what happened and how you respond to it. That space can protect you from repeating mistakes. It can help you make choices from clarity instead of panic. And clarity is valuable when you are rebuilding. You may not know exactly where your life is going. That's okay. You can still take the next step. You can still learn. You can still prepare. You can still improve. You can still become more responsible with the opportunities you have today. Don't wait until you have the entire staircase visible before taking the first step. Sometimes the next step becomes visible only after you take the current one. This is why rebuilding is less about having all the answers and more about developing the courage to keep moving while you discover them. There will be mornings when you feel hopeful and evenings when you question everything. There will be days when progress feels obvious and days when it feels invisible. Don't let one difficult day convince you that you have made no progress. A difficult day is simply a difficult day. It does not erase everything you have learned. It does not cancel every step you have taken. It does not determine what tomorrow can become. Keep building, keep learning, keep adjusting, keep making choices that move you toward the person you want to become. And remember that rebuilding does not require perfection. You will make mistakes. You will change your mind. You will sometimes take a wrong turn. You may have to begin again more than once. That does not mean you have failed. It means you are learning how to build something that can actually last. A stronger life is rarely created through one dramatic decision. It is created through hundreds of small decisions made consistently. The decision to keep learning. The decision to be honest with yourself. The decision to stop repeating what hurts your growth. The decision to develop patience. The decision to keep your commitments. The decision to take responsibility for what you can control. The decision to take another step even when the finish line is still far away. And eventually, those small decisions begin to change the direction of your life.